We made it. OS, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Ayub. Weather's starting to turn a little bit, it feels, in readiness for a long spring, summer, let's say, but doing very well. Been a long and trying week as well, you're right. So yeah, happy to take a little bit of rest, actually. Yep.
Are you not traveling to, I don't know what the stadium's called, but Pakistan versus India in Dubai on Sunday? Surely you must be going to that one.
A lot of efforts were made to try and secure some tickets, Ayub, but it's the, as you would say, the hottest ticket in town. With the game being played on Sunday, I believe it is. So
It
there
is,
should
yeah.
be quite that atmosphere. Obviously, Dubai being quite a large Indian and Pakistani contingent. So in terms of residents, so no doubt will be a huge event. Definitely will be following the game. Not sure if I'll be watching the game, but no chance of tickets. No way.
You,
No
you should have contacted me. I would have got in touch with Big Gorby, Big G. I'm
way.
sure he's Dubai based. I'm sure he could have he could have turned a ticket up for you.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a cracking game. Where is it?
Yeah,
How far is the stadium from where you are?
not far. We actually went to watch. I think I mentioned this to you last time. We went to watch. I think it was the Women's World Cup. My daughter had managed to get some tickets through school, so I thought it'd be a nice little event to go to with the family. And we went to that. I think it was India against Sri Lanka or something. It's a very small stadium. I'm sure it's the same stadium where it's being played. Relatively small stadium. I'm sure I'll have to double check the location. If it's the same stadium, again, very small for an event or for a game of that magnitude. Again, I will double check the location, but yeah, it should be a massive affair. Slightly unusual, isn't it? Obviously, with India playing their games in Dubai because of obviously long-standing challenges of India playing in Pakistan. It seems a little unusual because obviously, if India do get to the finals, the final, I think, will be played here as well, such as the influence of the BCCI on cricket. But there you go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They bring
I
in the
mean,
big dollars. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's what it is. It's sort of the power. BCCI controls cricket. They can do what they want, and they are doing what they want. So it is what it is. But let's hope for a Pakistan win on uh, on Sunday. Right. Okay. Let's talk all matters football. Right. For today's topics, we'll talk about top four and bottom three. I mean, it's not quite the end of the season or near the end of the season, but I've got to be honest. I think it's almost a foregone conclusion in terms of who's going to finish first. But maybe two, three, and four, or well, I suppose second is probably Arsenal, but maybe three and four is it's worth discussing. So in terms of the top four, what's your thoughts? As an Arsenal man, I'm sure you're probably still thinking that your boys might just squeeze into that first spot.
Yeah, look, I think it's an interesting time to be doing it, Ayub. I think tomorrow's games kind of signal the kind of two-third mark, isn't it, in terms of the season, and normally things start to take shape. You no longer say there's a lot of football to be played. It's actually games are being ticked off at quite the rate. A lot of cup competitions are coming to their own climax. This is when you want a fully fit squad going into some big games, ideally. Especially if you're a top club competing in multiple competitions. Yeah, look, I think in terms of predictions for the top four, you will cover the relegation spots shortly. Top four for me is interesting. I mean, look, I do believe Liverpool will win the Premier League. I think they've been the best team in the Premier League so far. Some are making out as though they are going through a little bit of a challenging time. I find that a little bemusing. It's 22 games since they've lost in the Premier League. I believe that's 15 wins and 7 draws. So I'm not sure you could quantify it as a wobble, maybe by their relatively high standards. You may think that. And look, I understand those that are suggesting that with a lot of games coming thick and fast for them, they obviously drew the game against Everton in uh, dramatic fashion with a last minute equaliser. This game in midweek against Villa drawing 2-2 probably could have gone either way, Yub.
Hmm.
Um, Albeit that Nunes miss looms large in terms of giving Liverpool the advantage. It's a chance he should have easily converted. It was not a difficult opportunity. You can make a lot of um, just on that, you can make a lot of excuses and what have you. And honestly, I thought did a decent job in terms of speaking about that incident, but the ball's on the floor, squared across. So what if it's on your weaker foot? The fact it's on the floor should mean it's a doddle from there on in. For him to miss, critical miss. If you ask me, Villa could have won it at the death as well. So I think it could have gone either way. I think a draw probably was a fair result, Ayub. I don't know what your thoughts were. I was kind of keeping an eye on events at the Bernabeu with Madrid and Man City on the same day. So I still think Liverpool will win the league. I think they're the best team in the league. Yes, they've been given a tricky draw in the last 16, but that side of the draw has opened up for them to potentially get to the semi-finals, I feel, of the Champions League. They'll be one of the favourites for that competition alongside Real Madrid. But I think Liverpool will win the league. I think they've got a fully fit squad. They've got an absolute cheat code, Ayub, on that right wing right now in terms of what Mo Salah's contributing to the season. Give him the
Mhm,
player of the year gong already. I think that's an absolute done deal.
mhm,
Ballon d'Or, maybe perhaps so, as well as if Liverpool can win a couple of the big trophies. So I think Liverpool will win the league. They've been the best team. They've got the best attack. They've got everyone fit and firing. Ayub, yes, Gomez is injured, but in terms of first 11 and options and Jota's back, they probably miss Gakpo, to be fair, against Villa. He's been one of their informed players this season, but I think
mhm,
they'll have enough to see this threat out. Again, it's not a fully fit Arsenal, although they probably will have Saka and Martinelli come back probably by early April. I think Liverpool have enough in the bank as well as the quality to see it out. So I think Liverpool will finish first. Are you quickly? Arsenal, I think I've said consistently. I think they are the second best team in the league. Are you? I think their defense is pretty elite, and that's not just the back four. I think that's just the whole structure of the team. Dominant central midfielders in Declan Rice and Partey. I just think they are a commanding defensive outfit. Don't give too many chances away. So I do think they'll finish second. I think they've got a little gap, of you, a small gap, albeit they've got to play West Ham, but then Forest there afterwards. I think they'll find their way to a second position, finish for 3 years in a row. That is now. Third, I do think Man City actually will finish third. Are you? I know they're currently in fourth position. Maybe perhaps a lot will rest on this weekend's crunch fixture at home to Liverpool after a disappointing defeat at Real Madrid in midweek. But just looking at it, you they're fourth right now. I think they've got enough. They've obviously they've got the FA Cup to fight for, but I think that's something they can manage. I do think they'll just have enough to usurp Forest. I think they've got a superior goal difference than Forest as well, so that should help them in that respect. But I do think over the course of the next 12, 13 games, they should have enough wins, although they've been incredibly inconsistent this season, to just surpass Forest. And I might surprise you with my fourth pick. I have a feeling that Bournemouth are going to do it. They're a little bit adrift at the moment. I'm not so confident that Forest can see this out. Although they're very much a defensive outfit, they've just started to concede a few. They've had a few negative results. Obviously, a lot will rest for them also at the weekend, but also midweek at home to Arsenal. It's a huge game. No doubt Liverpool will be keeping an eye on that fixture as well. I just think Forest will just slip out a little bit and not be able to sustain this. Whereas Bournemouth is such a attacking unit and got goals from multiple different places, especially that midfield's functioning incredibly well. Yes, they're about four adrift of Forest, I think, at the moment, but I think they've got enough offensive power, uh, as well as perhaps the inconsistency of Chelsea right now, where they're not giving me a whole deal of confidence. There's a little bit of noise around the club again. I've got a feeling that Bournemouth, with being perhaps under less pressure, Forest have been in those positions for now a good chunk of that season, Ayub. So a little bit of the pressure will start to tell, I think. And Chelsea right now, there's a lot of negativity starting to seep in around the club right now in terms of expectations, in terms of some of the run that they've been on. So yeah, let's see how it goes. I see it Liverpool first, Arsenal second, Man City to recover somewhat to finish third, and Bournemouth being the surprising package to secure fourth spot this season. How do you see it?
I've just been, I mean, whilst you've been talking, I've been obviously scrolling and just checking the fixtures uh, for each side, and I agree with the top three. I think Man City will sort of get into that fourth. I was thinking Chelsea, but I think I've looked at the fixtures. I think I hear what you're saying. I think Chelsea have just over the last few weeks, it's just sort of fallen apart, and it's the expectation is huge at Chelsea. I mean, I think it's not finishing in the top four probably might be considered a failure. I think from where they were, so it's going to be a tough. And I think Bournemouth are playing some good stuff. They played really, really well. They've got a great manager. Uh, I'm going to go Chelsea, but I would not be surprised if you're right because I think in terms of momentum, in terms of where they're playing and the expectations, Bournemouth are playing almost with a sense of freedom. I mean, I suppose their objective at the start of the season probably was to stay up, and I'm being quite honest. I think that probably was their expectation. So they're in the giddy heights, and really, this is just I mean, it's dream state. So really, if they'll be just thinking, right, let's just enjoy ourselves. So they're obviously playing without any real pressure. Chelsea are playing with huge amounts of pressure because really, I think the investment that's been made, the expectations of that football club, where they're at this moment in time, fourth is almost it's an absolute sort of prerequisite that they must finish fourth. So uh, I'll go with Chelsea, but I would not be surprised if you're right with that top four. And it will be a fabulous achievement for both. It really is. I mean, it's maybe you can't quite equate it to Leicester winning the league, but got to be honest, it's not far off.
Yeah, and I think to be honest with you, you'd probably say the same if Forest managed to get. Now, Forest have a lot more of a historical standing
Mm,
in English football, but you'd say if Forest or Bournemouth can secure top four status and represent England in the Champions League next year. Now, Villa broke that, obviously, and I think Newcastle broke it or broke into that conventional top four, top six a couple of years before that, if you remember. So we've had a few different representatives in the Champions League. Makes for interesting times. It's one of the reasons why you, without wishing to harp on about it, why we're suggesting that Man United and clubs like this have such a long way to go in terms of getting back to the big time. Spurs as well, are you? Because there's other emerging football clubs that are competing at the top of the table, not just your Cities, your Liverpools, and Arsenals, who at least over the last 5 to 6 years, and Arsenal more so in recent times, have become, let's call it staples within that top
mm,
two or three. You've now got other emerging clubs like Villa last year, like Newcastle, like even Brighton historically. You've got obviously Bournemouth punching above their weight. Previously, I think you've had Fulham knocking around there. So it's nice to see actually that there is that ability to, if you have the right manager, the right young profile in terms of squad personnel and what have you. Now, again, Bournemouth, I don't think can sustain it next year because I'm
mm.
convinced they're going to lose A, the
Yeah,
manager, and B, some key players. And it's the nature of the beast when you
yeah,
punch above your weight, you that the big heavyweights across the league and across European football will come calling, offering vast sums of money, not just to the club but to the players and coaching staff involved. So it's in somewhat a shame. But let's see. Yeah, I've got Bournemouth, but I think even if Forest, I'm sure you agree, made it into the Champions League, it's a huge story, isn't it?
absolutely. I mean, considering that was it last season or the season before? I mean, they were sort of uh, sort of flirting with relegation, so it's a fantastic job that Nuno's done. He's been incredible. I mean, the owners invested hugely in that football club, and maybe it's choosing the right manager sometimes. If you get the right manager, maybe that's the catalyst for the improved performance. But fantastic. I mean, and I think it's a reflection of the strengthening of the Premier League. I mean, sometimes we used to always sort of say that there's various sort of sub leagues within the Premier League, but I think this is one of the rare times where it's a really, really competitive league. In a sense, the top boys perhaps aren't as far away from the rest of the pack, which has made it really interesting and a spectacle. Uh, Obviously, you've still got Arsenal and Liverpool who are sort of significantly ahead of the pack, but the rest of the pack are. I mean, if you look at it from third, I mean, I'm just looking at the table here. It's 47, uh, Aston Villa ninth at 39. So I mean, it's 8 points in the Premier League is significant, but it's quite tightly packed. Uh, and there's a bit of a gap from sort of West Ham who was 16.
Mm.
So I think from sort of West Ham, even Wolves, I mean, Wolves a place above relegation, gave a damn good showing against Liverpool, which just
Yeah.
shows that I think that this is probably the most competitive. I won't sort of say it's the best ever standard, but it's certainly the most competitive Premier League that we've had for a long, long time.
Yeah, absolutely. There has been some discussion around social media about how good a season has this been. You're right in terms of standard, in terms of competition. I mean, you think back to, and I guess it depends what you like in a season. I mean, there'll be many who think back to that Man City Liverpool season when Liverpool fell a point short and thinking, well, that was an incredible standard by two elite level football clubs.
Mm,
Even Liverpool falling short that season would have won the title. God knows like how many years with that points total in terms of achieving it. The only one last comment I just want to make, Ayub, on this one, given that we're talking top four. If you remember, we spoke about this at the time when Enzo Maresca was talking about his Chelsea group when they were flying high early on in the season and spoke about how
yeah.
they weren't ready. And given subsequent results, many pointed to the fact that he was proven right. And if you remember at the time, I argued the point that I didn't like his message that he was sending to his club and to his players, that ultimately he didn't believe they were good enough to challenge with the big boys. Now, again, some argue that, well, he was proven right. I argue that he also perhaps influenced some of that in terms of the mentality seeping into the club. I don't think it's a good message to be sending to your squad, irrespective of whether or not internally you believe that we're not quite at that level. I think publicly there's some value in not necessarily suggesting that we're going to win the league. I'm not,
Mm,
nobody's asking for that type of prediction or hyperbole, but the case of, he can champion the cause of his players,
mm.
can suggest that we've got a lot of talent and we've got enough to win football games, and we're working on process and building certain consistencies and ways of playing and mentalities. I would have preferred the more aggressive, optimistic approach. He went for the more negative approach, and perhaps that did seep in because his players have struggled since then, to be honest with you, in terms of vast inconsistencies, and they shouldn't be. They've got quality players, Ayub, across the board there. So that's just one call out. I'm going to cut him some slack. It's his first season in the Premier League. But perhaps that's he'll sing a different tune if presented with a similar approach next year. That is in the event that he obviously makes it to next year, which is not always a guarantee at Chelsea Football Club.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only thing that I would say is that there was, I mean, it wasn't quite, I mean, there are sort of certain parallels with last season when he was managing Leicester because they went off to an absolute flyer. I mean, there was a 17-point gap between Leicester and Leeds at one stage, which was clawed back. So I don't know whether there's something in Maresca's coaching where maybe there's an intensity, perhaps. I don't know. I mean, but it was they fell away. But thankfully, I suppose for Leicester's sake they did enough right at the fag end of the season to secure promotion. So I don't know whether there's that or whether it's what you said. Maybe he downplayed it, and maybe I suppose that has seeped through into the players. I'm not sure if that has been the case, but the expectation at Chelsea are high. They've invested huge and heavily. I expected better. I must confess at the start of the season, and I still think if they don't finish top four, that's an underachievement. Because I was genuinely thinking that they were not only top four, but seriously, seriously, I was actually thinking that they will challenge. Maybe not quite be good enough to win the league, but they should be challenging for the
Yeah,
league.
exactly. And I think what you and I are saying is that we expect Liverpool, Arsenal, and Man City to cover three of the top four spots, irrespective of what order we have them in. I think we have them in the same order. But if
Mm.
Forest and Bournemouth are the team that's going to pip Chelsea to that last Champions League spot, depending on how English teams fare in the knockout stages of the Champions League, there may well be an additional spot, I believe. But if it's Bournemouth or Forest, that won't be received as well, will it, Ayub, in terms
Absolutely.
within the Chelsea hierarchy? Now, look, I'm not suggesting for 1 second it's his first season. Of course, he gets to crack on and take the helm next year. But I just don't think it'll be received so well if Forest and Bournemouth are the club that pips them to Champions League football, because ultimately Chelsea perhaps need to start playing in Champions League more than you would expect, like a Forest or a Bournemouth, in terms of consistency moving forward.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out and whether he is the coach come the start of next season. Because I mean I think certainly top four probably might save him. I think outside of top four the questions will be asked, and you know they're trigger happy at Chelsea, so you never quite know what the outcome will be. Right, we talked about the competitive nature of this league, and it's been borne out because the teams that got promoted are in the bottom three. So this is probably going to be quite easy. So I'm going to ask you for your prediction for the bottom three. Uh, there's four clubs at this moment who are cut adrift. So in a sense, it's three out of four. So you tell me, are you going to sort of say and surprise me by including Wolves in that bottom three or not?
Yeah, look, I mean, in terms of the relegation spots, Ayub, and I'll probably cover the broader topic as well if that's okay. But I think out of those four, I mean, it is out of those four teams. I mean, it's definitely at this stage, which means that perhaps there'll be a team that survives with quite a low points total. In fairness, you mentioned earlier Wolves acquitted themselves very well at Anfield. You're absolutely right, especially in that second half where they were probably the better team in
Mm.
terms of pushing. Liverpool obviously protecting a 2-0 lead heading into the second half. But Wolves did definitely acquit themselves well. Perhaps they have bought this manager in good time. Obviously, Gary O'Neill was struggling to get a tune out of these players. I think the Wolves faithful were also getting a little bit aggrieved at the stubbornness of the way they were playing in terms of playing out from the back. They've got major issues. The goalkeeper's a major issue right now for me. And he's really showed them up in terms of make all the statistics point to a more stingy defense, more stingy way of playing, and perhaps that's going to be enough. Ipswich really struggling for goals. If it's not Delap, they are really struggling without Delap's goals. They probably will already be cut adrift. He's another player who perhaps you will be moving on in the summer,
Well, you will.
catching the eye of some of the more bigger players or bigger teams, I should say, in the Premier League. Um, yeah, I think if you're asking me right now, I'd probably opt for the three occupying those spots right now. Southampton are doomed. Uh, they really got off to an incredibly slow start. And I actually think the manager has improved them somewhat, but they were just cut adrift too far. They had such a poor start, which they were never going to recover from. I think it's going to be Southampton, Leicester, and Ipswich. Van Nistelrooy's done okay at Leicester. When I've watched them, they've been competitive. They got a big win at Spurs. Unlucky against Arsenal in terms of they were quite stubborn up until obviously the 80th minute when the deadlock was broken by the substitute. So, but they have acquitted it. They look like a team that's competing. There's effort there. There's a certain style there. Again, probably not getting the goals that they need in terms of across the board. They also acquitted themselves at Anfield early on this season, although beaten handsomely in the end. But I remember over the course of the season, game, they did have a couple of good opportunities as well, scoring the first goal. But yeah, just it's going to be three or four. I just think Wolves perhaps just have enough in terms of, and it's incredibly tight, but I just think they might just have enough in terms of know-how and what have you. I'm gonna go with Leicester, Ipswich, and Southampton. Just very quickly, I'll let you discuss it a bit more in detail, and we'll kick it around. We mentioned about the kind of I guess inevitability about the three promoted clubs getting relegated. Now, it feels as though it's happened a lot more frequently than it actually has. I was checking the statistics, Ayub. It's only actually happened twice in Premier League history. Once in 97, 98, I believe, when Palace, Barnsley, and Bolton got relegated, having been immediately promoted from the Championship or the second tier of English football in terms of getting immediately relegated. And it also happened last year, didn't it? With
Mm.
Sheffield United, Burnley, and Luton. And this was despite Everton and Forest getting points deductions, you'll remember.
Mm.
So that happened last year. Now, if it happens this year again, that would be 2 years in a row. So that's interesting for sure. I'll let you maybe give us your thoughts on that. But yeah, if it is those three clubs, I mean Southampton, then it's obviously going to be one of the other two. It's just whether or not Ipswich. And the only thing I would say is it's such an opportunity for a Leicester or for an Ipswich. I mean, before the season, they would have been the favourites to go down, yes. But it's such an opportunity because with a third of the season to go, it's so tight between those clubs that if you can just string or get a little bit of luck, a little bit of the bounce of the ball, maybe it's even a refereeing decision that can influence certain things, a red card against you, so you're playing against 10 men, or a red card for the opposition. I'm just saying, if there's a team that can just string perhaps two fortunate wins, lucky wins, whatever it might be, uh, at this stage, it just may well be enough in terms of the gap that would open up. So there's still a huge opportunity. Nobody's cut adrift. Ipswich, I mean, for them, it's a huge effort from McKenna's part as well to still be competitive at the two-third mark. They were another team that many felt would be probably cut adrift by this stage. So yeah, interesting. I'm gonna opt for Ipswich and Leicester, just on the basis that when I've seen all three teams play, I felt Wolves perhaps have still the best chance of, creating more, and they've got a top player in Cunha who might just be enough in terms of converting some of those defeats to draws and some of those draws to win. They're not going to need many in terms of from now till the end of the season. So yeah, I'm going to go for the promoted clubs of Europe to get relegated immediately, not with a great deal of confidence, mine.
Uh, I'm with you on that one. There's a 2 point gap, which you'd probably sort of say that's one win. But the only problem with being at the bottom is that I used to always, when we were in the Premier League, I'd almost say that it was 10 games to get 8 points. That's how competitive, that's how tight, that's how tough the league is. For Ipswich, I mean, I've not checked all the fixtures, but for Ipswich, they are going to play Wolves. So there is that opportunity where they're going to obviously go head to head. So there is a chance, but I just can't see. I mean, you've talked about Wolves and maybe they just have that little bit more quality, and they've been in the Premier League for a lot longer than some of these clubs. So but also it's a reflection of how hard the Premier League is. I mean, Southampton, you're right. They're a gone. I mean, they were a gone a long time ago. Leicester is a good side. They've got some good players. And you're right. I think they've been competitive, but again, it's the standard of the league. I mean, the game against Arsenal, it absolutely encapsulated what this Premier League is all about. Albeit it was Arsenal, even though you've got a number of players who are out with injuries, but it's still Arsenal. It's a football club with a lot of quality. Uh, Leicester huffed and puffed. They had some half chances, but in the end, it's a game 90 minutes plus. And that's the thing. In the end, invariably quality will tell. I mean, we've seen this story sort of so many times that a team will battle, but at the end they'll be outdone by just that superior quality. Uh, Wolves, I think, will just have a little bit too much quality. They're more capable of probably sort of having 2 wins out of 6. I can't see Leicester. I can't see Ipswich having that same sort of run where they'll probably pick up 2 wins. As I said, if you're playing each other, you will have an opportunity to try and uh, get some points off your rival. But I just don't see it. I'll see, and it is going to be a repeat. The three that came up will go down.
Just very quickly though, you're right in terms of perhaps Wolves having a bit too much, but it was incredible, right? Ipswich got a huge draw last weekend against Villa at Villa Park with 10 men as well, taking the lead with 10 men.
Yeah,
Goalkeeper pulled off for me one of the saves of the season. I don't know if you saw it at the end when Rashford went to the byline, cut it across, and huge reactions just to save that and have that going past the other side of the post. Literally got his side a point because it was pretty much one of the last kicks of the game. So heroic effort from the goalkeeper. But it's great to see Ipswich again, super competitive, fighting for their lives to get a point at Villa Park with 10 men. Leicester incredibly competitive as well. We said over the weekend, Wolves had a great showing against Liverpool. How priceless would a point have been at Anfield if they'd managed to get it? So you are right. The three teams are scrapping. There's not a huge amount between them. It's not as though one feels as though they've got a glaring weakness. They've all got similar
mm,
weaknesses. I will say the Wolves goalkeeper leaves a lot to be desired. I think if they stay up, he will not be the goalkeeper for Wolves next year. Jose Sa, if they go relegated, him will keep him. He's been, for me, in all the games that I've watched, and I've watched a fair few for Wolves, a bit of a liability. But yeah, it should be a fascinating end, and it'd be nice to see, maybe not nice for fans involved, but uh, there is a little bit of a, I guess, a cathartic nature of watching kind of the relegate. Not great for you or you over the last God knows how many years, but
mm.
when it has gone to the last, I mean, it's a terrible feeling, isn't it, as a fan?
Yeah,
In terms of perhaps staying up, you've seen both sides, haven't you? But yeah,
yeah.
it's a tough watch when it goes to the last game of the season, but it would be great from an entertainment perspective.
Oh yeah, yeah. Without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, I still remember the game that we played against Brentford. It was just incredible. I mean, I still sort of have goosebumps when I think of that.
Yeah.
But it's a tough league. I mean, it's a great privilege to be in that league, but my goodness me, it's tough. But and sort of talking about that, I mean, it's something that I sort of broached with you in terms of what I wanted to discuss, and it's maybe it's because we're as Leeds we're potentially in a position where there's a likelihood we'll be in the Premier League next season, but then uh, it's there's a great deal of euphoria always when a team gets promoted, but the reality is that when you do get to the Premier League, you're going to face a lot of competition and you're going to lose far more games than you're going to win. And the history sort of tells us that a lot of teams that go up will come down. I mean, you talked about all three going up, all three coming down. Now, that's rare,
Yeah.
but maybe it's probably not going to be as rare as it once used to be because last season it was the three that went up, came down. This season it's probably going to be the same. So maybe perhaps that Premier League is even more competitive. So the question I want to try and ask is, and it's more sort of for perhaps for Leeds as well, if we do go up, how do you try and stay in this league? Because history tells you that there's a high probability that you're going to come back down. So, what is the best method of staying in this league? Formula? Is there a strategy? There are obviously some teams who've done that. I mean, Brentford now are established Premier League side. Uh, Bournemouth, they've flirted with relegation. Have they turned the corner? So, is there a formula? Is if you were the owner of one of these promoted sides, what would your strategy be in ensuring that the team that's come up stays in that league and earns you massive amounts of cash?
Yeah. Well, I support Arsenal, so I don't have that problem.
That's
This,
what United fans used to say. They're not saying it
yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, I was gonna say you. This sounds like a you problem to me. So you're on your own with this one, no doubt. No doubt. A year from now, I feel like we're gonna be having very similar similar conversations with you venting your frustrations at losing 6-0 at the weekend or something. But anyway, no, I mean, look, I'm gonna be keep it short and sweet on this one. It's interesting because Ayub, I know uh, one of your key talking points has been obviously what Bournemouth did when they stayed up with Gary O'Neill, and what they did in terms of making quite a tough decision, which I think you agree with, but perhaps one that was served in the best interests of Bournemouth Football Club, and that has been proven to be the case. So absolutely, that was interesting. I mean, you speak also about kind of you're mainly talking about promotion, like you get promoted, right? What are we going to do now to give ourselves the best chance? I mean, look, I can't speak to how you would go about it, but there is some, I guess, what we've seen from teams is we've seen various different approaches, haven't we? You saw the Luton Town approach, which again you spoke about quite eloquently at the time about how they were trying to set themselves up, not necessarily to survive that season. I think they'd pretty much accepted their fate, hadn't they, you in terms of that first
Yeah.
season. The idea was that perhaps they'd be best served to go forward once they get relegated. Now that's not proven to be the case. They've obviously struggled.
Bottom of the championship.
They bought
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so,
I
so
have no idea
I was
what on earth's
gonna,
happened. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So not one of your finer moments, I must say. But there's a long list of those as well. To be fair, so but no, I mean, but you were right at the time. To
Mm.
be fair, if there was a lot of kind of data and analysis and discussion points at the time that they were doing a lot of things behind the scenes to set themselves up to for more kind of sustained success. And this has been spoken about with Blackburn Rovers, our hometown club as well, at you, where a lot of people feel as though Blackburn are a championship football club. And perhaps that they don't quite have, let's say, the owners or the infrastructure or what have you to be able to compete. Let's say, I mean, there is some part of me that believes in that. To be honest with you, that there's a certain now, unless there's a huge variable that changes. Now, suddenly new ownership comes in. I want to spend a whole bunch of more money. Happy to pay big wages. Happy to invest. Happy to what I would say is speculate to accumulate. What I would say though is I think when promoted clubs are coming up, no doubt staying in the Premier League has huge cash and revenue implications. No doubt going down still brings in a significant amount of cash in terms of parachute payments, perhaps more sustained payments over the course of a couple of seasons. I think what a lot of owners, I think, may well look at, Ayub, is, like you said, perhaps making some tough calls when it comes to management in terms of whether or not they have the right manager. And I think that is a fair thing. A manager who might be best served to get you out of the Championship may not well be the manager that's best served to then keep you
Mm.
in the Premier League. We've spoken about certain managers having to adapt their style if they can. Warnock was one that was classed or labeled this type of, he's a
Mm.
either a relegation specialist or he can bring clubs up, and to some
Mm.
extent there was some truth in that. But whether or not they're then best equipped to kind of establish you, because that's what owners are looking at. They're not looking
Mm.
at just to survive. They're looking at somehow like a Brentford. I think that's the
Mm.
model, is to try and get up there. Now, Brentford have done it through Thomas Frank, who was responsible for bringing them up. They were one of the more, I mean, you'll know better than I do. They were
Yeah,
one of
yeah.
the more, I would say, well-performing championship teams. They were one of the better promoted teams when they came
Well,
up.
yeah, yeah.
I think Watkins was playing for them at the time as well. Ben Rama, if memory serves. I think they had an
Yeah.
elite level front line, but they've done it through consistency. And they've got a great settled cooperation when when you listen to Thomas Frank. He speaks about the stability and what have you. So there's various different ways that I think the idea is how quickly can we get to a point where we stabilize? I think for a football club like Leeds, you'll speak better to it than I can in terms of the 49ers group that's involved. I know there's been some noise about Rangers today as well.
Mm.
Um, it'll be interesting. I do think the best way to do it that I would argue is I think sticking with the same players that you have that have gotten you to the Premier League for me is not enough. There is a part of me, the romantic side of me, that believes that you can't change the entire squad. There is something about rewarding players who have brought you up with the opportunity to play big games in the Premier League. Maybe it's just the sentimental all sod in me that believes in that, but I think there is some room for that in football. But I do think you need to have a huge influx of players with Premier League established quality across, I would say, the backbone of the football club in terms of the footballing team, goalkeeper, centre back, central midfielder, maybe even an experienced pro up front. So I think the squad profile has to be looked at. The dressing room has to be looked at in terms of times getting tough and what have you. And like you said, sometimes the more aggressive approach of perhaps even changing manager. I don't think we've seen it that I can think of in recent times. You tell me if I'm mistaken in terms of where a club's come up and then fire their manager. Now again, where we've had what situations where clubs have stayed up and then parted ways with their manager. But I wonder whether or not more and more clubs will say, "Thank you for getting us to the big time. We're now going to go in a very different direction because we actually think that the challenge of getting a club from the Championship to the Premier League is fundamentally and vastly different to then keeping us in amongst the big boys and position ourselves for long-term success." Seems ruthless, but I wonder if more and more owners perhaps might go down that route to say it's a horses for courses thing. Great, thank you very much. We'll send you on your way with a big fat pay packet, perhaps, and then move on to perhaps a different type of management. But yeah, interesting. I wonder whether or not your club will perhaps go down that route. I know you're a fan of maybe perhaps doing that approach.
I'm certainly a fan of. You know that that's what I would do because he's had two promotions, but he's had two relegations. In the two seasons that Farke has managed in the Premier League, he's got
He's
relegated.
he's consistent.
Yeah, consistently bad. But it's one where it's a subject close to my heart for obvious reasons because it's something that has happened and potentially something that's going to happen in terms of the promotions. Certainly, uh, it's one where I have tried to think about it. That what would I do if I was the owner, if I was responsible for Leeds United Football Club, or certainly sort of involved in managing this football club? What would I do? Uh, Certainly sentimentality. I mean, I am an all romantic. I am a sentimentalist, but not when it comes to sport. I think this is where I'm ruthless, or I would be ruthless, because it's sport is not real life to a certain extent. So therefore, I my behavior is reflective of the fact that I view it as it's a completely separate entity. The first thing I would do is identify, right, who is capable of playing in the Premier League. Now, I went through the lead side actually, and maybe there's one or two potential starters. There's a number of players that perhaps you can say, right, you're good enough to be part of the squad, but no sentimentality. Thank you so much for getting us up, but right, on your way. Same with Daniel Fark. Daniel, excellent work getting us up. I mean, I would still question whether it's his coaching which has got us up, but for argument's sake, let's say it's his
You-
coaching.
You're
But I
talking,
would,
you
yeah,
talk, you are talking a bit presumptuously, are you, Pierre? I mean, you're talking about
no,
whether
yeah.
whether if it's his coaching that has got us up. I mean, this is the bullish and confident Ayub that we've been waiting for all season long. I mean, this is
But I would, if we do go up, I'm not, as I said, I'm not going to tempt fate. So if we do go up, I would certainly, as I said, as the owner, I'd say, Daniel, thank you so much, but I just don't think you've got the coaching capabilities to sustain a side in the Premier League. So he'd be out. Then recruitment is absolutely crucial. I think what you don't want to do is just go berserk and just sign players here, there, and everywhere. I think Premier League experience is essential. It has to be. And you're looking at character as well. So this is where the tough part becomes because, right, you've already got lots of sides in the Premier League who've got Premier League players, but I would genuinely be looking at players that have got the experience of playing in that league, uh, trying to sort of buy as many Premier League players as I possibly can do, because we've seen so many times these promoted sides buying flair players, and they're no doubt good players. But it's a completely different ball game. The Premier League is a different beast. It is the best league in the world. Now, somebody might sort of say, well, Spanish is more technical, but the Premier League is unique. Uh, it takes players sometimes a season to adapt. If you're and you're going to be at the bottom, you haven't got a season to adapt. It's make or break. So that's why I would absolutely insist on making sure that you get as many Premier League players. The character has to be crucial because it's going to be a tough, tough grind. It's going to be hard. Uh, you're going to lose more games than you're going to win. It's going to be a battle. You're always going to be on the back foot. So it really, it's. I think people, too many clubs get caught up in the euphoria, and rightly so, because at the end of the day, when you get to the promised land, you want to celebrate, but there has to be an element of realism. And I just don't think enough clubs have done that. So my strategy certainly would be right. We got the personnel best equipped. If the manager is not good enough, or if you don't think he's good enough, you've got to make that call. But there is that sentimentality. These players have got us up. It worked for Bielsa during that first season we came up. I mean, it was a bizarre one where these were at best championship players. Liam Cooper, Stuart Dallas, players like this were championship players. Click, these were championship players, but he was a genius. I mean, Bielsa is an exceptional character, exceptional coach. I mean, in the following season, the irony was in the following season we bought a few more players. I think we needed more. I think we needed more quality, and that was one of the reasons, perhaps, why we went down. But uh, this is where it really does need. I won't. I'm not even going to sort of say it needs creative thinking, but it just needs you. The history is in front of you. It tells you that promoted sides are going to struggle. So therefore, uh, the Premier League's been going for nearly what 30 years. We've got a nearly, I think, 43% of the sides that go up apparently come down. Or I think that's the stat that I read. So
oh,
virtually half the sides that go up will come down. So somewhere along the line, some owner has to say, I'm going to have to book the trend.
yeah, just I'm with you, but I think there's also something else at play here. Two things. One is that ownership. I mean, you know how it works. You, if they can get away with spending the least amount of money and being able to keep the club in the Premier League, that's the option that they'll go down. Now they'll evaluate a lot of the competition and competitive clubs, and we've spoken about this before. Let's say Leeds come up next season or this season, and obviously play in the Premier League next year. They'll look at it and think, well, okay, well, let's say Wolves have survived. They'll say, well, okay, you've got Wolves and you've got the other promoted clubs. Let's say it's Sheffield United and Burnley, for argument's sakes, and Leeds will think, well, we can compete with Wolves, and then you've only got to find, we've just got to be better than
Mm,
those three football clubs. So it sometimes owners find excuses not to spend money because they'll sometimes look at the competition and say, oh, there's other clubs in
mm.
amongst us that we can be better at. So there's kind of that as well. And I guess the other challenge, Ayub, is if you do go quite not reckless but quite aggressive in the market to try and secure a Premier League experience, that normally comes at some premium in terms of fee and salary. But then also, unless you're going to heavily incentivize it, you're going to cover a lot of that in the base salaries of the players, which means that if you do get it wrong, you're then covering a lot of those salaries in the championship for players who don't want to play in the championship. So that normally sets you
Mm.
up for some sort of financial Armageddon, if you catch my
Yeah, yeah.
drift. So there is that balance to be made about speculating enough to be able to accumulate Premier League survival and safety for the season after. I don't think it's an exact science, is it? If you go super aggressive, you may set yourself back for a number of years if you do end up getting relegated. Equally, if you do nothing, you're going in with to your point, a championship level squad in amongst the big boys. So you're already capped in terms of what your ceiling is, which is probably 15th, 16th. So
Mm.
you're kind of in amongst the bottom half of the table. So yeah, I'm with you. Let's see how it works out. Just on Leeds very quickly, I'm going to indulge you for a couple of minutes because I know we want to quickly just cover City against Liverpool, huge game at the weekend. I'm just going to indulge you a couple of quick questions. You don't need a huge monologue from your side, but big win on Monday. Who were the goal scorers again, Ayubi? I think it was a brace, wasn't it, from Pascal?
Pascal, yeah,
Right.
Pascal Strike,
Did he start the
unbelievable. I
game?
mean,
Did he start the game?
uh, he didn't start the game. Well, I know
Okay.
where you're
A
going with
couple, a
this
couple
one. I
of.
know where
I
you...
mean, and who assisted those goals? Are you?
Joe Rothwell, who didn't start the game,
Oh,
so
who
you can
didn't
turn
start
around.
the game? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe that, as I said in the in the WhatsApp message to you, maybe that sort of begs the question: they should have started the game because it was the players that he brought on. Now you can turn around and flip it and sort of say that's what a manager does. But Pascal Struijk is, I would probably say, is one of the best CBs in the Championship, and he's one of our better centre backs, if not the best centre back. Joe Rothwell is our most creative midfield player. His distribution, his set piece delivery are exceptional. Probably sort of say he's one of the best in the league. He wasn't starting. We had
Well,
Gruev, whose set pieces I could have done better. Seriously, I could have done better.
yeah, but
So maybe you can question Falk's management for about 70 minutes when he sort of decided, hang on, this is not working. I'm going to
yeah.
have to change things. Uh, so it took him 70 minutes to change it.
It's a fair point, but the counterpoint is that a lot of these games, you said yourself, it's a huge game. Second at the time, Leeds against I think fourth placed Sunderland, and many could argue that the game perhaps will be tight going into the last 15, 20 minutes, and you've got to leave a couple of aces up your sleeve on the bench who can ultimately make a desired impact off the bench. That's what he did when he brought them on, I think, in the 71st minute, and ultimately got reap dividends for that. I'm not sure what Daniel Farker actually has to do other than played 46, 146 for Ayub to be.
I'd still find criticism to be did that.
You'd still be trotting out your line saying, "Thank you very much, Daniel, for your services."
Yeah, yeah, just on the game itself. I mean, it was fitting that we talked about why I was allowed to talk about Leeds and obviously my experiences and my sort of journey with Leeds United Football Club. And it was in a sense it was fitting that it was on the eve of that game and how the game sort of panned out and how the game ended because it was incredible. I mean, I could not sleep because of the adrenaline, and that again is a reflection of what this means. And it was just amazing. I mean, we went to goal down and frustrations and the reality is because at that stage the gap between Sunderland and Leeds United was 4 points. And I'm sort of thinking, I mean, I would have been more than happy just with a draw. So we equalised, and then to score the last kick or the last head of the game, it was just incredible. Again, I wasn't watching it. I was following it on Twitter. I was downstairs, so as soon as that went in, the TV went on. So I wanted to enjoy the last bit, but it was just incredible. It really was. It's what it's about. I mean, I think obviously you don't want this every single time because obviously it's too emotionally nerve-wracking. It takes too much out. But my goodness me, it's every now and then you want a game like this, and it doesn't get any better.
I was going to say, you tell me if I'm mistaken, it just came to mind. Was it the reverse fixture at Sunderland, or was it the Middlesbrough game or something when Melier made that mistake with the catch, or is that somewhere in my
That's the one.
confused?
That's the one. We
Um,
were winning 2-1. The last
Kick
sort
of
of,
the
I mean,
game.
it
It was
was
the
an
last kick.
yeah, yeah,
Was it?
it was 95th, 96 minutes. So in a sense, there was I mean, maybe, I mean, I suppose you can't say poetic justice because we
Yeah.
weren't really, it wasn't something that was Sunderland had created, which was unjust, but it was just nice that we were on the right end for last minute sort of goal.
Yeah.
But it was, I mean, it was a defining sort of moment that goal that Melia let in because it sort of we were looking at it from the point of view that if that hadn't have gone in, this game perhaps wouldn't have had that magnitude of importance, because obviously we there would have been a slightly bigger gap. But this was huge, huge, because from 4 points it became 10 points when that goal went in. So it just shows, in a sense, as I said again, I don't want to tempt fate, but it almost sort of ticks off Sunderland as potential top two. Burnley are playing tonight. George, our dear friend. I mean, I love him to bits, but obviously, if they can do what they always do, 0-0, I'll be happy with that.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah. So
it's a great season ticket at Turf Moor right now. But what I would say is, I mean, look, in terms of Leeds, you mentioned about your fandom, just very quickly, just to finish off. But the reason why I brought that up is that does encapsulate, in a sense, what life has been like, and it is for the life of a football fan. But that I remember when Melier happened again in the reverse fixture at Sunderland, you
yeah,
confirmed. I just remember it because you text me if you remember saying you need to watch
yeah,
this. Straight
yeah.
away, I checked it on Twitter, I think in the middle of the night. And so it's the most bizarre goal. I
Yeah, yeah.
would
I
encourage
mean,
everyone to get
I
out.
still can't. Apparently it hit a divot, but I mean, we're talking about. I mean, these are quality football pitches, even with a divot. It's not. I mean, this is not Pleasington.
Yeah, I
For
mean,
those
yeah,
watching
yeah.
Pleasington
Well, if
played there, you know.
well, you've mentioned the pitch today. I think post mortem when we discussed the game in the podcast, I think you blamed Daniel Fark for that goal too. So I think yeah, so it's all coming out. Anyway, quick discussion on just the big game. Are you on Sunday? I think it is City against Liverpool.
Yeah.
Obviously, they had a draw in midweek, which I guess many feel has opened the door slightly for Arsenal. Some argue Arsenal will play on Saturday against West Ham at home. How do you see it? Are you? It's a huge game still. I mean, City Liverpool historically has been a massive game in the last 5 to 7 years, with obviously two elite level managers previously, Guardiola and Klopp. Guardiola having the toughest
Mm.
season of his Premier League uh, time here at Man City, and obviously Arne Slot going for a maiden Premier League title for Liverpool Football Club. How do you see it, and where do you see the current status of the Premier League title race?
The way that I'm looking at this fixture, I think, is a reflection of where we're at. Now, under normal circumstances, it would have been an eagerly anticipated game. I'd be absolutely sort of foaming at the mouth, looking forward to this game. I think it 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 doesn't excite me at all. This game, which is a reflection of where City are at. I think it's going to be. I'm not going to say it's one-sided game, but I think Liverpool are going to win this game. In the end, I think there's going to be a reasonable amount of comfort, uh, only because City are just absolutely abysmal at this moment in time. I mean, that it was a false dawn. I mean, I thought the Newcastle victory uh, perhaps might have just galvanised the football club, but they were reverted back to type midweek. I genuinely thought might just cause an upset because they've got nothing to lose. But really, they were quite embarrassing. Albeit they are playing a side that is littered with absolute world class stars. But still, I think City is this season's a write off almost. I would sort of say so. It's a game that last season maybe would be drooling. This it's Liverpool are playing. To me, it's like playing Crystal Palace. That's the way that I see
Oh,
it.
hang
That's why
on, hang on, hang
I'm doing a disservice to Crystal Palace. Sorry.
Wow. Okay. Uh, I mean, you are right, Ayub. It doesn't have the fanfare that it has in previous seasons. Fair. I mean, that's a fair call. And I think actually heading into the game, you'll probably see that to some extent. Liverpool are favourites for the game. I don't think they've ever been favourites heading into a game at the Etihad. I can't imagine that to be the case
Mm.
over a single game. Some talk about Haaland still being unfit. He obviously didn't play any part, although he was on the bench against Real Madrid, but he didn't play any part in that game. You're right, they went out meekly, although they went out to a top team. Real Madrid really hitting their stride. Of course, had a slight hiccup over the weekend with the Bellingham red card, and now having been usurped at the top of La Liga. But midweek was comfortable for Real Madrid, and they really put a number, or did a number, I should say, on Man City. It was men against boys, complete
Mhm.
domination, and that's without being too disrespectful. Just over the course of 90 minutes, it felt like that. It was not a competitive game of football. Real Madrid had way too much for them. a player that I know you're a huge fan of, Mbappe, really hitting his stride now at Real Madrid. And yeah, look, tough way to go out, but they were inferior. Probably lost the game in the first leg, no doubt, with that turnaround at the end. But yeah, City for their top four hopes, this is a huge game. Liverpool, I think there's been a bit too much made of, again, a couple of draws because that's what they are. It's a couple of draws that they've had against Everton. Some may argue that they started to look a little bit fatigued. I don't necessarily think that's the case. It's just that you do have these periods and seasons where you're not winning games, and the great thing they're doing is they're not losing them. So they're still
Yeah.
packing up points, picking up points. They've obviously stumbled to a win against Wolves, uh, although probably deserved after the first half display in and of itself. Had a few tight calls in the second half themselves, disallowed goal, penalty reversed. Um, but I expect Liverpool to win, Ayub. I expect them to get back on that horse, so to speak, with what will be ultimately a confidence boosting victory. I'm going for a 4-2 because I think it'll be one of those type of games where
Wow.
Liverpool play, Man City play, and I think both teams will go out there trying to score goals, and I think we'll see quite a few. Both teams showing a little bit of defensive vulnerability. You would say City for sure, even Liverpool in recent times. A couple against Everton, one against Wolves, couple against Villa. Although Villa are a decent outfit, at least at Villa Park, they've not lost there since August. So yeah, I mean, a big game for Liverpool, especially if Arsenal can win on Saturday. They'll perceive that to be a little bit of pressure. But I do think this time they'll get a good confidence boosting win. A win at City, Ayub, is still a win at Man City. Let's be very clear. And I think Liverpool will take great confidence. And I think they've got nothing to be fearful of. There's talk, like I said, of Haaland missing. I think Marmoush is better served at City playing with Haaland in terms of Haaland
Yeah.
so much attention. You saw that against Newcastle, where they did do a number on Newcastle. So it's in there somewhere. Yeah, but I think with Liverpool's athleticism, let's be honest, and their intensity, they should have a bit too much for this Man City outfit right now. I don't think it'll be embarrassing per se, but I think Liverpool are the superior team, will show their superiority and come out with a 4-2 win.
I hope it is a 4-2, and that'll be a cracking game. So I look forward to that. That's on a Sunday. Uh, and that is more or less it. Uh, there's no other major sporting points of discussion. So I think we'll sort of bid you a fond farewell. Enjoy the weekend. Whatever you're doing, have fun. And we'll see you hopefully on Monday. So take care. Ta-ra for now.